Hafaday and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the historic Guam Congress Building. You are in session 1, Respecting the Past While Designing the Future of the Guam Congress Building, and it will be conducted by Mr. Richard Reed and Mr. Tony Kim. The architectural design for the restoration and rehabilitation of the Guam Congress Building incorporated the Secretary of the Interior standards for historic preservation and the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED certification. The Guam legislature was awarded the USGBC's highest rating, LEED Platinum, the only building on Guam to achieve this distinction to date. Again, your presenters are Mr. Richard Reed and Mr. Tony Kim, who are the principals at RNK Architects. And if you guys need the restrooms, it will be out that door. Take a right and another right. And there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. So, Mr. Reed?
Good morning, everyone. I'll be a little nervous for a while, and then I won't be quiet at all. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for attending. RNK started this project in 2009, which was a long time ago. As a historic preservation project, oh, I can't believe that. Okay. Excuse me. Oscar, I can't talk right now. So we started in 2009. It was a historic preservation project, and the idea was to recreate the building as it used to be, which is the mandate of historic preservation. After that, the owner of the building got involved, which is usually the case, and they expanded the program to meet their needs, and that's how we created the building we have here today. The original footprint of the building was probably around 12 to 15,000 square foot maximum. When we got here, there was less than 12,000 square feet, which is this big lozenge in the middle. When we finished the design, it was 20,000 square feet with the two wings on the either end here. This is the north wing, this is the south wing. The south wing is made to model and mimic the existing old building that was here, so that as you walk into the front of the building, everything is the same when you come. Whereas the backside was expanded to the maximum we could accomplish in order to fit the functions that the legislature needed in the building. The program requirements were pretty much set by the existing building over in Hessler Place, so that everybody that was in that building had a place in this building. It was designed for 51 employees in the building full-time and the functions that we have here for governance and gathering. Let's see, do we have to have me up there? It's disconcerting. Can we put up a slide, please? Okay, that's my company. We've been in Guam for a long time. This is the historic preservation component of the project. And they have a lot of R's, respect, renovate, reconstruct, rehabilitate. And when we wrote the program for this submittal to local Parks and Rec, we ran the gamut. We were performing every function within the national parks lexicon of tasks that you could perform. Is that better? That's too loud, don't you think? No, that's okay? All right. So within that context, we pretty much addressed every aspect that the National Park Service wanted addressed in a structure. And we did forensic studies in the building. We did sketches of the woodwork. We did basically inventory of all the woodwork for everything that was existing here, so that when we went to refurbish it, we would have a record. Now that didn't actually transpire, but that was the intent, and that's really the way the documentation occurred. And the largest effort really went into the woodwork, which is, I think, the singular aspect of the building that sort of tries to give homage or tribute to what the building represents, which is all the way back to England, to the buildings that created where people pounded on things and talked about stuff and made things happen. And so this is, in my humble estimation, the arc that goes all the way back to what the principles of these buildings are, which is to have a little bit of decorum and to discuss. Those are the two issues to me. So to that end, we had, if you can go to the next slide. In 2007, this building was added to the National Registry of Historic Places. And the reason for that was the 1948 walkout, in which I think they were senators, left the building in protest against the U.S. naval governance of the island. And that ultimately led to the current status of Guam as a territory under President Truman. And I don't really know a whole lot more about that aspect of the historic aspect. From there, I knew I should have prepared for this better, but from the next aspect of the history of the building that was integral to us was its initial construction. Who designed it, why, where, when, how. The building was built or designed by a group called PIE Engineers, which had an island-wide contract right after the Second World War. And they did most of the large buildings that remain on island. This building, one of the things that's very nice about it is 70 years old, and that's a nice age, especially on Guam for a building. PIE was, it's called Pacific Island Engineers, was a group that was out of the west coast of the United States, and they came here with a mandate and a huge contract, and also a large infrastructure. They had casting beds, they had cranes, and so they were, from a constructivist position, they were enabled to do things at a much larger scale. And so the roof of this building is precast, which is pretty unique. But it wasn't the only precast that was going on in the island. These guys, since they had big cranes and big budgets, they were able to do things that were at the forefront of contemporary construction at the time. And so that's kind of cool, considering where Guam is, right? So they also, one of the things I like to talk about is they also put their insignia on things. As an architect, they had a little game that they played where they put their little moniker on stuff so they can say that it was their building. And that moniker is the orthogonal grid. Like, it starts with the windows here. You can see it, of course, here. That's the crosshatch pattern for the windows. But if you look at the end of the south wing, there's another little hatch pattern that runs north and south on that. That's their signature. It's also, if you look across, it's on the post office. On the side of the post office, you'll see the orthogonal grid go up and down that. If you go up to Naval Hospital, you'll see it on Naval Hospital. If you go to the, what's it called? The officers' housing that was on the other side of, on the back side of Nimitz, it's in all of those buildings there. So it's just a sneaky little way that architects worked on the detailing of these things to put their signature on it. We grabbed onto that and we used it as a motif here. And to say that this place is rectangular is an understatement. I mean, everything you see is based on a rectangle. So we used it on the backside of the north wing. You'll see that we used their insignia very high for 2 stories. And so that's just kind of our tribute to say, we know you were here and we know what you were up to. So we're happy about that. That's an architect to architect kind of thing. Let's see, I'll take the next slide. Yeah. Okay, so we all know what this building was. I came to Guam in 1990, and this building was abandoned already then. And as an architect, I was going through downtown Agana, and I said, wow, they abandoned their library, you know? I thought it was a very nice building, and it sat there for another 18 or 16 years until I was lucky enough to wind up in my lap to do business with. And so we're very happy about that. If you remember, this portion or this phase of the building was mostly pigeons and homeless. But the shutters were here. At least 2/3 of the shutters were in place, about 1/3 of them were gone. And so we categorized all of those and put instructions to contractors for what we wanted done in terms of what needed to be replaced, what could be repaired, and what would be renewed. Next slide. This photograph is from, I would say, the 90s, because the wainscot that's on that wall was not here when we got here. There were horizontal lines in the concrete for the sleepers, which are the pieces of wood that get embedded in the concrete that all this gets attached to. But the handrail at the top was here, and you could see that the entrances to the two main assembly areas were there. None of that was here when we started in 2009 in terms of doing our study of the building. Before we did it, they had, this also is a early 1990 photograph. The only thing that we found when we got here were the balustrade on the second floor, and that door at the end was there. And so what we did was we took, so this is, just to talk about what this used to be, my understanding is the reason there's a hole on that balustrade on the second floor is that was a walkthrough, and this room was 2 stories that people lived on, worked on a second story in here for who knows how long. But that was a solution pre-1990 for how to effectively use the building. FYI, this portion of the building was to be a territorial court. It was not, actually, the building was designed to be bicameral, which means that there was a Senate on one side and representatives on the other. That was quickly changed to the senators on one side and a court on this side in terms of the design history of the building. Now it turned into a 2-story Winnebago in here after that, so I don't really know what happened. But I can tell you about what the initial premises of the buildings were. There's a nice car. This elevation of the building we have tried to maintain, and we think we've done a pretty good job. If you go to the next one. Next shot. One of the things that we did that's a little different is if you see the 6 windows that are in the middle, and there's a piece underneath it that's a flat roof, and it kind of moves out here to the south wing flat roof. We altered all that a little bit. We moved that up, and we moved that piece up so that it has a facade in front of it, so that you don't see those windows as much. That wasn't the intent, but what we were trying to do was to get that piece off the top of those doors, because we wanted the doors to be 15 foot high. That's another conceit that we added to the building that's not original. So I'm sort of confessing my sins here. But the idea was, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I was around a lot of important buildings as a little kid, just running in downtown. They all have huge doors. And you're not supposed to miss the door as an opportunity to talk about the power. And so that's what these front doors are about. It's to sort of say, yeah, be quiet, show respect. Okay? And you can see here that if you were to take a look at the front of the building right now, the 3 doors are recessed. There wasn't a a set of double doors as there is there now. There was just one set of doors in the back. So when we put this other set of doors in there, that's sort of another flat surface, which is the same thing we did on the south wing. We moved the walls on this east elevation out to the end of the wing in order to get as much space as possible. Now, all those are done within a respect for the fabric of the building. In other words, we didn't want to change the way you really felt about it or saw it when you looked at it. Okay, next. Yeah, that's the old building. If you can see when you're looking at the piece at the bottom, which is the south wing, you can see that the 4 little pieces on the right stick out. They don't stick out anymore. We've raised those over. And if you go to the top, you can see that what's the north wing is about a third of what we made it. We moved it all the way across as much as we possibly could, and then made 2 stories out of it to try to gain 8,000 square feet for the function of the property. Okay? Also, the last photograph showing you what they did for asbestos and a lot of other issues when they changed out the building in the 1990s. This is our take, and this is the floor plan that we put together. You can see all the things I just talked about. The north wing at the top is much larger, open space, and the south wing is as large as we could make it, respecting the original footprint of the building. Okay? This is the kind of survey work that we did. This is a registry of each panel on the shutter. Every single panel is judged on this matrix for what needs to occur to it and what our instructions to the contractor are. I forget how many panels there are, I'm sorry, 30 something. But that's pretty much what that photo's about. Next. This is while we were building the building, or while we're trying to sell this process to people, we would juxtapose these old photos and what our intent was. And so this is us showing off our graphics for what we think we can do, okay? And this is how architects make money, right here, by trying to help you see what we see in such a way that you can understand it and we can move forward. This is the pigeon heaven. And this is what we wanted to turn it into, and I think we pretty much got it. These are the functions that were performed and how we wanted to respect them. This is how we look at a building as architects. I was talking a little while ago about this 8-foot grid. If you look, these are on an 8-foot grid. All of these columns are on an 8-foot grid, and you can see it all the way through the building. It's an organizing element. It was very strong. We just worked within it. It was very simple, and we adhered to it. It made things easy for us. There's the 8-foot grid going the other way, which is these guys at the top. So it was very nicely laid out. It's a rational, modern building in architecture vocabulary. Okay. This again is we're showing people before how we think the building is going to turn out. I think we got it. Hold for this one. You can't, it's hard to explain. In this historic preservation process, you are supposed to be able to tell the difference between the original and the new. But the new is supposed to pay respect to the original. And that's a dialogue between those two pieces. So what we didn't want to do was the level of fenestration, the level of little tiny rectangles that are on the existing building. But what we did follow was the path or the pattern of the 8-foot grid. And if you look at the building on the east and west elevations of the building, this argument isn't shown here very well. It's very blank. If you look at the end, this end wall here and the end wall on the other side, they're blank. And so when you look at the building from the end, it presented itself on the north and east and west elevations as a blank. And so we tried to follow that a little bit more, take away a lot of the busy window stuff and make things a little bit more, not blank, but a little less articulated. And if you look at the other side, the same thing again. We don't have the articulation, we have the pattern, and you can see there where we put in the little respect to the PIC architects. Are there any questions? Okay. So there we are. This was several years of my life as an architect, and we're very proud of it. Okay? This was the other aspect that we performed on this project, which was LEED. And do I need to explain what LEED is, or does everybody know, or what would you like? Do you want me to explain it? LEED is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. I think it's been around for about 15 years, maybe probably a little bit longer. But what it is my profession has very little regimentation to it. It's all very driven by what I think should happen on a specific site. What the LEED guys came up with was a matrix of values to look at a building from an efficiency level, not an aesthetic level, okay? Aesthetics are still that's the art of architecture. But on an efficiency level, these guys created a matrix that they represented for how to judge a building, for what it can do for efficiency. They start with the argument that more than 50% of the energy used in the United States is office structures. That's more than homes, more than anything else. Office buildings use more than 50% of the energy. So if you can turn around and change that, then you're coming across with a very broad-based response to energy efficiency. And, you know, it's funny, when the doctor was talking in the previous lecture over there, he was talking about connectivity and respect for the land, and a lot of those issues are actually in LEED. Not the same way the doctor might have said them, in a much more modern context. But we're going to go through the breakdown of LEED points. About a third of them are site-specific, which means that if you do certain things with your building, you're rewarded. The second third of them is energy, which means if you do save energy, you're rewarded. And the third is basically for the inhabitants of the building. If you make moves that make the building more pleasurable to be in, you get points for that. So those are like the three criteria that LEED breaks down into. So the first, I'll walk you through the site work. The site work is 26 points. I can't tell you how long I've looked at that sheet. It's the scorecard. And what these guys have done is they've taken your efforts to do design and found a way to put it on a scorecard. And you spend a lot of time looking at that scorecard, making sure that you can satisfy those criteria. So the top left-hand corner is site work. And I can go through these for you if you'd like to know them. Why don't we just roll the slides? I'll walk you through the site work. In concert with the themes of this morning, you have a large responsibility under LEED for your site. In other words, they've taken existing laws and brought them to focus so that you must address them on your site and show how you're addressing them. And so what happens here is this is an erosion control plan, and what what there is there's a boundary all around the property, like a leaching field of rock, so that the water, when it gets to the edge of this property, doesn't go any further. So our responsibility to the community is not to overrun the drains in the system. And so what you do is you create a calculation that shows you how much water you're going to generate, and then you find ways to keep it on your site. Typical stuff, every subdivision has to do it. Next. This was a fun one. This has to do with endangered species. And we found a grouse hen that lives in the swamps over there in the marshes, and we didn't endanger it. Next. We also didn't use up any farmland to build this building. That's important. One of the other things that LEED talks about, this is the flood zone, but LEED wants you to build in urban environments. They're not interested in you doing subdivisions. They want you to reuse things that are within the grid. Just by coincidence in California, there's the state legislature put in a override to zoning ordinances in all the cities that allow higher density for homes. So that's the state telling all of the municipalities that their zoning ordinances in their cities can be overridden if people want to put more lots in the cities and have them higher occupied. The theory behind all of that is that the infrastructure is already there, everything works supposedly, a lot of it is underused, so start compacting the cities with your functions, and they reward that effort in the process. This is a flood zone, which we had to address. This floor happens to be far enough above the flood zone by inches that we didn't really have to go after it. Okay, next. This is, that's a half-mile radius of the building. And so the process there is you have to show that you're part of an urban fabric in order to get certain points. So you start with a half-mile radius, you move on, and where did we go here? Wetlands, never mind, we're not anywhere near wetlands. And so what this is that's the half-mile radius, and we're showing a number of business types that are of, no, is this business or is this residence? This might be residence. Anyway, there's both, I think. There's businesses and residences that you have to meet a criteria in order to get the point. So we did that. Okay? This is, what was this? Termites, I think. And brownfields, I forget. There was some aspect of this that we found that they had taken care of in the 1990s that allowed us to get a point. So what basically we had to do was research the history of the building to find out what moves had been taken for issues that would be constructive from a LEED perspective. Next. What's this one? Oh, this is the transit system. That another thing that if you're juxtaposed to a transit system, you get points for that. And so we're starting to describe the bus routes. And the next photo shows the bus stops that are within the vicinity that met the criteria. So you can see where this is all a fabric about how urban is your structure. How, not how good the design is, but just what the juxtapositions you will have in your community. Is it in a community that you can take advantage of? And this building was. What's this? Oh, the bicycles. For the bicycles, that was another way to get a point, is to encourage people to use bicycles. To that end, there's the little bicycle stoop out front, and there's also, if you change, next, there's a set of showers on the second floor. Just for the speaker, I worked with Dr. Shimizu around 1994, and his claim to fame was that he put showers in his office so that he never had to go back to Inarahan. He could stay at work. but the showers were in order to encourage bicycle use. Parking. There's a prioritization of parking in terms of handicapped and also cars that are electronic. And so they were supposed to be over here. That's since been changed. That's up to the owner to do. Next. Preferred parking again. And site development. We were lucky enough on the building site to have enough land to meet a lot of criteria for green space. The building wants to have, or the criteria are that you don't turn everything into asphalt. You keep as much green space as possible. And we were able to squeeze that into the criteria and meet it for points, okay? Stormwater control, I spoke about that. That has to do two things. One of the things that I think we could have done better is we have these, a parking bed on the north edge of the property there. And if you remember, it was we were trying to mimic the stuff that's at Micronesia Mall. But in the construction, I think we got a little bit too big in terms of the holes. And so it's hard for use. But the intention of that is it absorbs all of the water that comes off the parking structures. And when you're upstairs, it matches the grid. What's this one? Heat island effect, same idea, shade and shadow, again being issues that, albedo is the name for the reflectivity of the sun off of the ground. And a higher albedo, which means the more concrete you have that's reflecting sun, the hotter it is. And so what you want to do is create more grass, which absorbs it, doesn't reflect it as much. And so that's what this is another point going after. And this has to do with the fact that we have a white roof. That's all that is. Next. So this was the first phase. And we received 70 design points, base points for our efforts that we just walked through a portion of it. We needed 80 points to get platinum, and those points were going to come during the construction process, and we were successful in that effort. Go ahead. This is, I call this slide Beautiful Tropical Guam. I don't know the name for the chart at the top, but if you can see the letters on it, they're all about 85, 95, and 100. Those are annual rainfall for Guam. And rainfall here is a resource, is the way I look at it. There's more than enough. Before the Navy created a water system on Guam, everybody collected from their roofs. And that was how Guam persevered. Next. This is, again, more about the rainfall on the island. Did I put the equations in there? Can't really read them. I'll go through the equations for you. We collect rainwater from basically this roof on this side, just the last three over here and here, and then we kind of collect it from this roof over here. It goes to a cistern that's located behind us underground. The cistern has a pump, and that cistern pumps all the water that's used in the toilets in the building and the spigots. So the cool thing about that is this roof here on this side, by calculation, generates about 18,000 gallons a year, okay? Which was not enough to do the toilet use, which is around 45,000 gallons a year. So, but what's not unique to this building, but what's also a resource for Guam, is we collect the condensate off the air conditioning system. And that's also dribbles out into the tank. It dribbles out at a rate of 108 gallons a day, which equates to 27,000 gallons a year. So your air conditioning system for this building generates 27,000 gallons of usable water a year. That's pretty cool. So that in turn is used for the water system here, which lowers the water bill, but not terribly effectively, but it gives you a way to lower your impact on the GWA resources. You're generating all this stuff on site. So it's, the next place we'll go to is the power, but, so it's pretty cool. The biggest, these are, we just wanted to show you this, to show you the modeling calculations for the building, because what happened was the mechanical and electrical engineers, but most of the mechanical engineers run the numbers for this building to figure out exactly how much electricity it uses, what the heat loads are, what the calculations are. These are the tables they do them with. It's a pretty intense process. The way that you make points with LEED is there are already standards, contemporary modern standards for 2000, I think you did 2010 for this building, that show what the baseline is that you have to meet. And then LEED will give you points the more you can change that in terms of energy conservation. And we were able to push it at least 40% above the standard for a brand new building on Guam. We're proud of that, because that saves the owner money all the time. There's a lady that will testify to that fact right there. Next shot. These again are the calculations that go through the building. These are the lighting calculations for a portion of the building. This has to do with each one of these lights. Now, just for conversation's sake, these lights, they're LED lights. But what we did was we, in our scope of work, we had the contractor save all those existing lenses. Those are the original lenses from the original building, okay? And the hardware connecting them. But everything inside them is brand new, so that we have a little bit of the history and we have complete efficiency with the lighting type. The net result of that is you drive your energy pricing down. And so that last table was a matrix to show how much this building is thought about in order to perform, because it does. It's a high performance building. It's hard I mean, I love the woodwork, and the performance, the electrical and mechanical performance of the building is kind of like a sports car. It's highly tuned and it's high performance. And no more said than that. It's just, it's much more balanced a building than anything else there is here. Now that includes hotels. When you do a hotel, the guy that's a hotel manager, he makes his money on showing the bosses that he can drive his costs down, his electrical costs down. And that is part of what his job is to do. So we've already done that here. We've taken this building and pushed it as far as it can go in terms of saving the owner money. This is a table that shows you what you can generate in terms of electricity in a year for your building. It's on a website. You can look it up. You fill in the criteria. On the bottom, it's hard to see, but it tells you for this tropical environment, for this longitude and latitude, for electricity at 24 cents a kilowatt hour, you're going to save $21,000 a year based on a little equation that they've done there for the size of your photovoltaic panels. Okay? So you have 64 kilowatts of photovoltaics out there. It's going to save you $21,000 a year. It cost, I think we were looking at $200,000 at the time, but it came in at $300,000. So the payback period on that was really long. However, we got better data here on the payback period from Agnes, and we're doing much better than that. Go ahead. What do you got, Tone? Anything more? This is the construction. Let's go back to the other one. So, Speaker, my position to you is I'm a believer in photovoltaics after doing this building. That combined with a rigorous approach to the building envelope and the lighting systems in the building, you can save, what do we show? Close between the, and I assume you understand this already, but between the old building, there was an old building that had the 51 people that are in this building, and it had a little like 24,000 square feet versus a 20,000 feet in this building. And this building is 40% cheaper to run than that building. And we thought it was more, but that's because we had the mall in there at the same time. But just isolating this building, there's a 40% reduction in costs, which according $35,000 a year less, is that right? On the electrical, I think that's what you're showing. That's they have the records for almost 1 year on this building versus the old building. So we thought it was a lot more previously, but I'll take $35,000. That still means, that changes the payback period to the building to about 8 years, which is much more what the standard is, what the norm is. So when you invest the $300,000, this $35,000 will pay for it in about 8 years. And that's the standard in the states across the board. Okay, next. This just was our did someone turn me off? No, I'm still here. Okay, this was to show respect to Regalang from BME, the contractor, and this is the kind of work and service they did during the construction period in order to maintain the lead points. These are the table on the right is criteria they monitored during the construction process in order to show lead the validity of our efforts towards completing this project. Next. So this was a very happy day for us after at least a half a dozen years that we received certified platinum. We did everything under our power to do that. We had the good graces of an owner who supported us financially, and we were happy to turn this over. I don't know anybody else is going to get a LEED platinum on this building, and I think some guys on the military base say they've come close, but talk's cheap, and we've got the seal, and we're proud of that. That's all I got.
Richard, on behalf of the Guam legislature, I want to thank you for all the work that you've done on the building. And personally, unfortunately, I'm so old that I actually remember, I wasn't here when the building was born, but I attended Music Academy next door, which was the Guam Academy of Music. And I was so intrigued by this building in the early 50s. I used to run across the street to watch the legislature in session, watch the court in session. I was only 5. And that stopped one day when I was running across the street and I got hit by a car and almost got killed. That was in 1955. But I also came back to the building and worked here when they had that second floor here. How those of us that were here, I don't even think Agnes was here during that period, but you would gingerly walk across the floor because it was very soft and you weren't sure you're going to fall through. So I'm very, very happy about the work that you've done in this building and all the certifications that you provided. The back building, I encourage everybody who hasn't had a chance, please go look at the additional wing that was put on. The architectural homage, as it were, is absolutely beautiful. And had we put in the dividers that we wanted to initially, it would be beautiful. It would be beautiful, but it is still an absolutely amazing building. And so, on behalf of the Guam legislature, I am proud to present this certificate of gratitude to you for contributing to the success of the summit, but more importantly, to the success of this building and the historical aspects of this building. And the LEED certification, it really is an amazing building. We have all of the electronic drapes that go up and down, the shutters, and even somehow they managed to put electronic things on the blinds on the top, so those open and close depending on where the sun is at. And so if you have a chance, walk around the building and just enjoy it. I've enjoyed it for the last year. And on our wing, the speaker's wing, I remember that, though in some of the pictures in the 90s, for some reason that building had been that wing had been taken down. So I'm very happy that you restored that, because it is a beautiful part of this whole building, and all the windows that keep the PIE signature is really a tribute to your architecture, you as an architect. And so on behalf of the Guam Legislature, I'm happy to present that, and to Mr. Kim.
Tony. Please understand that this is a partnership. 51-49.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
No questions? Okay. So we'd like to ask the speaker to stay here, and we're going to take a group photo with everyone who's here attending this session, and then you'll be on your merry way to the next session, the next breakout, if you are not going to be here at the 11:15. Thank you.